Dutch way has admirably upheld the freedom of the people to live their lives as they may choose. The balancing of individual liberty with a mature approach has permitted the development of a unique society that retains its values, progresses with the times, and in doing all this, even maintains an ethos of sustainability. Perhaps this is among the key factors that allowed the Netherlands to be the ideal ground for a flourishing cannabis culture, and moreover, embrace the progression of medical cannabis. Hopefully, just as the Dutch artist Rembrandt channeled Mughal art as an inspiration, medical cannabis will also soon be a landmark confluence for Dutch and Indian cultures. Keeping in mind this spirit, our first keynote speaker is the founder and chief executive officer of Bedrocan International, Mr. Tjalling Erkelens. Under his leadership, Bedrocan has become the only company in the world whose cannabis is exported for patient use in full compliance with the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, 1961. For the past 20 years, he has worked towards developing and standardizing unique methods of producing cannabis to pharmaceutical standards to a level achieved by no other company in the world. His strong commitment to product quality even resulted in the Dutch Bedrocan cannabis plant production facility being approved under the GMP, that is Good Manufacturing Practice Standards, by the Dutch health authorities in 2016. This has allowed Bedrocan to reach out to patients in countries such as Canada, Finland, and Germany, among others. Please welcome Mr. Tjalling Erkelens.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me here. It's the first time I'm in India, and it's really a pleasure to be welcomed the way we have been welcomed here so far. I would like to take you out of the country first, bring you to a place up in the north of Holland, and this is 32 years ago. Actually, this is where it all started, where you see two guys. The guy on the right side, if you look very well, you may recognize something in the guy standing here, but that's actually me. The other guy on the left side is my brother-in-law, and together we started in 1984 the company which you see now in front of you, Bedrocan. At that time not named that way, it had a different name. The name came only up, and I will talk about that later. Came up later when we started cooperating with the Dutch Ministry of Health. This was actually the first thing we did, a crop called chicory. Chicory is an indoor-grown crop, and that's where we started growing indoors, learning about how to maintain conditions and how to maintain a certain standard of working. Hygiene, for instance, is very important when you grow indoors. It's kind of like a nursery, like a hospital where you're working in. So in 1984, we started that agricultural company, and in 1992 already we started producing our first cannabis crop indoor for the production of cannabis seeds. That was a legal way of growing cannabis in Holland in those years, and actually that was the start of where we entered also into the Dutch program. The Dutch Ministry of Health started the Medical Cannabis program in 1999, and we were interested from the start. In 2002, we got our first license to produce medicinal cannabis, and in 2003, actually, the start of the commercial program and the start of production of medicinal cannabis for patient use was becoming effective in September of that year. Bringing us to the latest highlight, that is that we are now fully compliant and certified under good manufacturing practices. And the good manufacturing practices normally apply to the production of a medicine in a factory. However, the Dutch government and also the European government see the production of raw material nowadays also under GMP, and that's how we are basically certified. So the production of cannabis as a raw pharmaceutical material is now under GMP. What are we aiming for in the next few years? Well, we are aiming for clinical trials. It's already mentioned here. Clinical trials are the way to prove that your product has the real efficacy you claim that it has. We are about to build a new cultivation facility in the Netherlands, And we are about to start setting up cultivation facilities in Australia. That's one country, but also in Germany and Italy are countries that are having a real interest. So we are nowadays a producer of what we call standardized medicinal cannabis. I'm going to elaborate on that word a little bit more later. Our products, strains, varieties, however you want to name it, are now being used worldwide by patients, but mainly also by researchers and in the pharmaceutical industry. They are using it as a raw material to produce medicines, basically. And of course, we, as having the experience for 25 years of cultivation, we are able to move on very quickly now. The Bedrocan name, people are always asking about it. It's just interesting to know for you. Bruining is the last name of my brother-in-law. Erkelens is my last name. And we are actually producing dried cannabis. So if you combine that all together, you get into the word Bedrocan. And we use quality basically as a trademark. When the health ministry comes in to check our products, they are taking their samples, and then it looks this way when they are making the samples. So actually it brought us to the idea, how can we make a logo out of this? Well, this was how it looks like. Sample taking stands for quality and quality control, and that is basically where our logo is coming from. The Bedrocan organization nowadays is built up from basically from multiple organizations. We have a central organization called Bedrocan International, and we have licensed companies underneath operating there. We have, of course, our product development part on the left side, and we have our business development part on the right side. But what is interesting is that we have what we call a phytoengineering department, which is actually placed into the international organization. The phytoengineering part is the core of the Bedrocan business on the plant side. Phytoengineering also allows us to license other companies and to guide them through the production of cannabis in a standardized way. Being a bridge between patients' needs for cannabis and the quality standards of modern medicine is basically one of our main mission statements. The other one is being regulatory compliant. That's where it all starts with. Being regulatory compliant is the basis of a proper company that is working in controlled substances. So we work with regulators, we work with patients and healthcare providers, and we work with science. And that all leads to a scientific, relevant, and compassionate, also a compassionate product, because we listen to patients as well. We are producing multiple varieties with different chemical content. The Bedrocan variety, which was the first variety we brought to the market, is a high THC containing variety, followed by a lower THC variety called Bedrock. Our first CBD variety already came to market in the Netherlands in 2007, containing approximately the same amounts of THC and CBD. And later on, actually only 2 years ago, our full CBD variety came to the market, which is called Bedrock Light. Bedrock Pure and Medica are THC varieties as well, but they are basically on the indica side of the plant variety. So where we have the sativa plant types, we have the indica plant types, and the Bedrock Pure and Medica varieties are on the indica side. Arno will elaborate on that a bit more later, because the difference is interesting. Where are we operating nowadays? Well, from our headquarters in the Netherlands, we have a licensed facility in Canada. We have an operation in the USA. We have a licensed facility in the Czech Republic. We are working in Australia, and we are working in Brazil. I noticed on Avnish's picture that Brazil was not yet there, but Brazil is getting there, I can tell you, and people are already working there, first on CBD products now, and THC will come into the market also later. If we look into the European market, we are on multiple places. We are exporting, and we are producing actually in Europe. We are exporting to a lot of countries, and a lot of countries, the green ones, are the upcoming countries which we are dealing with nowadays, and establishing especially export to those countries under the European and under local laws of countries which allow us to go there. As we go through the pharmaceutical route, we don't have a parallel system in Europe. In the countries where we export and produce in Europe, everything is done under the standard pharmaceutical regulations. And that's an important thing because in other countries like the USA, like Canada, you see that parallel systems are being established to allow cannabis to go to the market. Those parallel systems don't provide the pharmaceutical quality mainly required by the healthcare providers. Healthcare providers want that pharmaceutical quality of products. Healthcare providers and also regulators mainly believe in standardized pharmaceutical grade material. And that's the approach the European governments are taking nowadays. And in that regard, there is a lot of interest for the Dutch program nowadays. I will briefly go over a few countries globally. So where people think that in the USA everything is possible, well, on the state level in the USA things are possible, but again, it's mostly parallel systems, non-pharmaceutical products, and basically a chaotic legislative situation. There is no fundamental distinction between recreational and medicinal use in those countries, and the products being provided to patients, it's basically done from this, very often done from the same place. You go to a dispensary in the US and you can either choose where you go legal medicinal or you go legal recreational cannabis. It's not the way we see things happening in Europe and more countries. So the current industry standards in the USA are definitely below pharmaceutical regulations, and the opportunities for research are coming up now. The federal government is recognizing that there is a need for research, and they are actually making it possible in a very hard way. They are not rescheduling right now. Cannabis will stay a Schedule 1 product, but universities in the US are now allowed to produce or create their own products for research and testing it. In Canada, everything is brought under federal law, but they created a parallel system aside from the pharmaceutical system. So products being produced under Canadian law are clearly protected by law, but not standardized according to pharmaceutical regulations. There are now more than 30 licensed companies providing material to over 70,000 licensed patients, but again, operating outside the pharmaceutical system. And actually, Bedrock Canada is one of the very minimal companies there producing under pharmaceutical rules for themselves. The other company doing the same is a company called Keynote, which is the original Canadian producer for the Canadian government during the period 2000 till 2013. Australia just legalized cannabis for medicinal use under federal and state legislation. It's a bit of a difficult system there. The federal government allows for the production of the plant material, where state governments allow for the use of those products into medicinal products. So pharmaceutical created ointments or oils or tinctures can be produced based upon plant production done under federal law. They only allow standardized products in Australia. They really deviate from the American or North American situation. The system is just only up for a couple of weeks now, November 1, and companies can apply now for a production license. However, the production license in Australia for plant production needs to be attached to a production license from another company that is actually creating a product, a medicinal product out of it. So only pharmaceutical and clinically tested products will be allowed to the Australian market. Latin America is a little bit unclear as more often. Uruguay was one of the first countries that implemented full legalization of cannabis, and it turned out to be kind of a political and not only political but also an organizational mess, where you see a few hundred companies being allowed to produce cannabis there. The control over those products is very poor nowadays, and product is being diverted to the black market again, something they wanted to prevent, but it's not happening the right way. And medicinal cannabis is still far away. Although they provide it through pharmacies, the legal recreational product next to the medicinal product are both available in pharmacies there. Colombia legalized medicinal cannabis only this year for medicinal use. It still needs to be worked out there. Chile did the same, but it's also derived pharmaceuticals. And Brazil approved medicinal cannabis in 2015, only CBD first, but THC is coming up there. Most countries still schedule cannabis as a no medicinal value and a high risk of diversion, so this is Schedule 1. However, the growing minority in rescheduling and allowing for recognized medicinal value is coming up, but it's going very slowly, like I just explained with regard to the USA, for instance. But basically what you see in the countries coming up now is that they want standardization and they want a pharmaceutical approach to this product. In that regard, the Dutch model has all that. We have an OMC, an Office of Medicinal Cannabis, which is the regulatory office mandatory by the UN regulations, and that office takes control over the product. It takes possession of the product. It's very comparable to the poppies industry. Farmers producing poppies have to deliver their poppies to the state agency, and the state agency is bringing it to producers that make actually morphine or other opioid products out of it. The Office of Medicinal Cannabis was established in 2000. It's part of the Dutch Health Ministry. It's responsible for production, distribution, and quality control of the product. So the quality control is external. They mandated our company, and actually initially two companies. One of them was growing in a greenhouse, and we were growing indoor. And we got the mandate from them to produce the herbal material. As said, they have the monopoly on the trade, and they have a website up. You can actually look and see what is actually available through the office there. What we see happening nowadays is a huge increase in interest for cannabis and cannabis products, and our products are being being preferred quite often because of the pharmaceutical standard behind it, and you can see it actually in the export numbers that are rising pretty fast now over the last years. That comes along with our production capacity, where 4 or 5 years ago we were producing about 200 kilos of dry product annually. We are getting to the level next year where we will produce almost 3,000 kilos of dry product. Things are moving quite fast now. We are located in the north of the Netherlands, where we have our production facility. In Leiden, Arno will talk about that a little bit more. We have our R&D laboratory. We have now 10 grow rooms for production available and 3 grow rooms for research and development. Altogether 790 square meters of production, and we are able to produce 1,500 kilos now. Next year we will go to 3 locations. One will be built in the center of the country, and we expand from 2 to 42 grow rooms for production, and that will lead to a production capacity of almost 5,000 kilos, and we go to almost 3,000 square meters of production capacity indoor. It's all indoor. 5,000 kilo of products next year, and we have the possibility to expand in the new facility with another 4,000 kilos of production capacity, all due to the rise of demand in product from multiple countries very near to us: Scandinavia, Germany, Italy. They are all demanding for more product right now. How does that bring us to India? It's a very different, country somehow. But it's always interesting to know that the whole cannabis culture in Western Europe, in America, actually came from here. Everything that people are using nowadays in Western Europe, we had a discussion yesterday about words like the chillum pipe, bang, all those terms, we find them back in the European cannabis culture and the North American cannabis culture as well. So actually, I'm returning to the mother ground here, where we can start talking about how we can use some of the techniques we invented with your traditional knowledge on cannabis. And that is actually the ideal situation we see here between what we are doing and what might be possible here in India. So we can learn from traditional use here, and we can learn just for the matter of acceptance and compliance also. The combination of traditional knowledge and state-of-the-art technique we are applying in Holland might be a very interesting option. And I'm not saying that you have to do everything the same as we do it. There will be options to create a situation in which we can comply with standardization, but still do it on a more local way here that will allow for a product making it as cheap as possible, because the accessibility for patients is quite often based upon the price of the products. That all aligns with our mission and vision, because we are working for patients. That is basically what we want to do, and we are working for patients through science. That is how it works, and I think that will be possible here as well. Everything that happens between countries, as far as we are concerned, happens on the governmental level. So our OMC is open to discuss with other countries on the regulatory level how we do things in the Netherlands and how we can cooperate. I think that is a very important, very important part and a very important backup we have from our own government. The Dutch model, the possibilities of cooperation and the exchange of technical knowledge, it's all on the plate here, and we can discuss that. Business opportunities, of course, that's another thing to talk about. There is business always behind everything in that regard, but it all depends on the scale. So if you look into the Canadian situation, that is a quite transparent model nowadays. The program there, the real program, started in 2014 on a 35 million population. We now see 70,000 patients, and the number is rising very quickly there. We see the same happening in the Netherlands. However, in the Netherlands, where recreational use of cannabis is still an open possibility for people, we see lots of patients still going to that recreational market for their products. However, the most interesting part is that we see that on the black market or the recreational market, the prices of cannabis are increasing, while the product price of cannabis in the pharmacy is decreasing. So what we have seen over the last 2 years is basically that a product in the pharmacy is cheaper than the street product. And that also, of course, leads to an expansion of the sales. And again, that's where we go very fast nowadays. In that regard, India is a very big country, so from a business perspective, there will be an interest as well. So far, the company. I would like to talk a little bit more about standardization and quality control in cannabis, how that works, and how we got to the level where we don't need to pioneer anymore. We actually know what we are doing, and it's proven by the GMP status we are having right now. Now it needs to move on. Give me a sec. Yeah, maybe double click. No. All of a sudden, I have no connection anymore. Yeah, there we go. It's working again. What does standardization actually mean? Well, for us, standardization means that in the products you bring to the market, you have a defined chemical composition of everything in it. So we're not only talking about THC or CBD or cannabinoids, nay, we are talking about the whole product itself. Cannabis, Arne will elaborate on that, has so many other compounds that might have an effect on people. So that's one of the main things, the chemical composition. Products should always be available. That's another thing. If you are providing a medicine to people, you cannot say all of a sudden, oops, it's not there anymore. We don't have the product anymore. We now are having a new plant here. No, that's not working. The third thing, of course, is that you produce under very strict protocols and guidelines. And you capture them in what we call a quality management system, a QMS. Your QMS is basically the core of your business, controlling everything you do. And everything you do needs to be controlled by a third party. You can control your own products, that's nice, but there is somebody outside that needs to say recreational cannabis is non-standardized product. Medicinal cannabis obviously is legal. It has a defined quality, it has a stable composition, a known composition, and it has no contamination. Contaminants in cannabis are very often there, and in the illegal product you will find quite often residue of pesticides. You will find mold and mold spores. You will find all things you don't like. So the problems with street cannabis are here: microbes, pesticides, growth enhancers, additives like for coloring and weight of the product. You will find heavy metals. Cannabis as a plant loves heavy metals. And even synthetic cannabinoids are being used to enhance the product. And the most important thing, it's non-standardized. So if you want to use street cannabis, you will always guess what kind of product you have. You will never actually know. Who cares about standardization? Well, regulators find it to be very important. They only want to allow standardized medicines to the market. Physicians and patients, of course, they need to have a product that is always the same. They can rely on it. The industry creating medicines out of it, they need a reliable API. And researchers, of course, want to have reproducible results of their research, and they need a standardized product for that as well. Clinical trials, do we need them? We already have seen medical clinical trials with products that are based on single compounds or two compounds. Sanifax, Epidiolex, products from the Phyto-pharmaceutical in England. We see Marinol, it's an old product already, only synthetic THC. We see Nabalone, also only synthetic THC. And they have done a lot of clinical trials with that. However, it doesn't contain all the compounds cannabis has. So do we need something for herbal cannabis? Yes. As soon as we have a standardized product, yeah, we can do clinical trials. Standardized whole bud products, you can do it with that inhalation and ingested products. However, what you see happening in the US and other countries with products like candy, cookies, we don't think that is a viable way to go. There are other routes of administration for that, and we mainly see that as cannabis oil or cannabis tincture that can be ingested. Clinical trials with our products are about to happen. They basically start in 2017. There's a clinical trial happening in Australia, in the Ingham Institute, which is part of the Sydney University. It's a palliative care research on pain management and mood and well-being, and appetite. In the Netherlands, a study will start on fibromyalgia, and in the Czech Republic, they're going to do a research with a cream for atopic eczema. Cooperating in those clinical trials, cooperation with the International Cannabis and Cannabinoid Institute in Prague in the Czech Republic. And under that organization, there is the Medical Cannabis Research Collaboration established, and that is aligning all those studies on a global scale. What is important in standardization? Of course, the cultivation process is important. The processing of cannabis is important. The lab research is important. And the distribution. All those steps are important for your standardized product in the end. But how do you standardize then? Well, that is, of course, an important question. The first question is then, what do we actually mean when we are talking about standardized cannabis? And this is the core of what we do. What we call a variety comes from only one single seed ever. That single seed brings you stable genetics. People are quite often saying that's not possible. The plant material will die off. It will fade out, and you need other seed material to come to the exact to come to a similar chemical profile. We not only believe that that's not true, we actually see that it's not true. With stable genetics, we already are working for more than 20 years. Our main variety, Bedrocan, arrived from one single seed ever in 1995. Since then, we are maintaining vegetative growth of the plant material in a way that it allows to live on basically forever as far as we can see. We have to do some more research on that, and we will do some more research on that, but we are pretty sure that it works. We are having multiple varieties now this way, stemming from only one single seed ever. Of course, all new plants are then made by cloning. That's how it works. So your cloning technique, the maintaining of your genetic material, that's all very important in that process, and that is basically IP of the company. But it results in identical plants, and it results in identical chemical composition, and that is a very important step here, of course. Next to the genetics, you need optimized growing conditions for each variety. Every variety has its own specific conditions on temperature, the need for water, the duration of the growth cycles. It's all very specific per variety. But for every batch, we do it the exact same way. And we check that, of course, every day. Doing things the exact same way every day actually means that we do everything on a time basis also. So every variety has its own time schedule, and we can actually account for it. It means that if we want to harvest, if we know we want to harvest next year, July, something, we know when we have to start our genetic or our vegetative growth cycles for that specific batch. That's how it basically works. Multiplying endlessly, as I just said, our varieties are stemming, most of our varieties are stemming already from the 90s. A few of them are from later date, but the important ones are already from the 90s, so 21 years old. And our certificates of analysis on every batch show that the product is always the same in that regard. Planning, as I said, a very crucial thing. We have to plan in advance, and when we start today, we have to count 5 to 6 months ahead before we have the product ready. And we need to take care that there's always enough for patients and research. That's why planning is very important. Process control, of course, quality management system, and the quality management system is ISO 9001 certified. So external control on our process on a yearly basis, and the same applies now for GMP, good manufacturing practices, which is actually being controlled by the Dutch government. The health ministry, the health inspectorate is responsible for checking those systems. Training of your staff is, of course, very important. I'm just talking about cloning, and it looks like it's just something you do. Well, cloning is a very specific process, and you have to take very good care of your product in that regard. Actually, to me, it's the most important step in the whole production cycle. Your cloning steps and your maintenance of your genetic material is the most important part of everything. Third-party quality control, I mentioned it already. Your batch control. So each batch of cannabis we produce is being checked externally but in a laboratory, and it's done by the Dutch government. It's not done by ourselves. This is the result of one of our varieties over a production cycle of I think it was 2.5 years, 10 different batches within what we call standard deviation. THC and CBD always comply, and we had no failure in this row of batches. Do we have failures? Yes, we have them sometimes. In the last 13 years, we had actually 3 failures. And those 3 failures were all related to basically too high number on the THC content. Normally in herbal production, the higher content you have, the better it is. But if you want to use it as a real medicine, you cannot go there. The product needs to be within those standard limitations. So the 3 failures were basically now on more than, I would say nowadays, more than 400 batches of product. So that's below 1%, so that's not too bad. This is an important picture. Again, Arno will elaborate more on it, because outside the cannabinoids you also have terpenes. Terpenes is actually the part that makes the products smell, but terpenes also have a certain efficacy, as many of you will know. And our terpenes are also stable in our products, but I will leave that to Arno. Registration of every step you do is an important thing in our company. People are, I would say, in production, 20 to 30% of the time, people are just registering things and taking care that everything is done according to the production protocols. So we have a huge paper trail, and that is also to prevent product diversion, for quality management, and of course hygiene is very important. ISO and GMP require a lot of registration in that regard. If we're talking about standardization and how we achieve that, standardization is about learning. One of the golden rules of science is only change one parameter at a time, and it's basically how we got to the level where we are now. Our cultivation room being used as a laboratory basically to find out what is the best way of doing things. You can compare what is happening in the background. If you pick out 3, 4, 5 plants on a batch of a few hundred plants, and you change one condition for those few plants, and you have the rest of your room as a background, it works. You can find out the best way of doing things, and that is actually how we came to the point where we are now. Different lessons we learned in the field of light, the color of light, the amounts of water being applied, how to use predatory bugs instead of pesticides, and how we use air filtration also as a mean to prevent the use of pesticides. It's all done in our Department of Phytoengineering, as we call it nowadays. Phytoengineering is basically to validate and improve the standardized working methods we are having under ISO and GMP. Phytoengineering is responsible for the predictability and controllability of the production process. So quality, quantity, and costs are being monitored there. Create and test potential new varieties. It's another thing we are working on, because there are so many compounds in cannabis, you cannot find everything in only one single genetic variety. You need more for that. And of course, maintain outside contacts with universities and research institutes. Let me take you on a short tour inside. This is actually how it looks on the inside of our main facility nowadays. You will not see any plant growing there. It's closed, it's locked up, and people have no entry whatsoever. Only people that have the right key, that have the right, can unlock the rooms. However, the production rooms are not to be unlocked at all. The whole production cycle, when we are flowering, the rooms are not opened. The whole system is automated, computer steered, and nothing needs to be done by humans anymore. What humans do is this: making cuttings, cloning. That is a human task. And putting the clones into little rock wool cubes. We are not using earth or dirt to plant the plants in. We are using inert material, rock wool, and we can apply the exact amount of water and nutrients the plants are in need of. After cloning, the little plants are being put into bigger rock wool blocks, and actually this is the final stage already where they, in these blocks, they will go into flowering as well. And this is what you see after 5-6 weeks of flowering. When I said we never go into the room, well, this time we went into the room to make this picture. It happens. Once the room opens up again, it's for harvest. Harvesting the plants, as you can see, is immediately followed by the first control step, and that is weighing. Weighing is there to prevent diversion. Weighing is there to also see that you're standardized. We can compare to previous batches and see that the plants are always doing the same thing. Once the plants are being harvested, they go into a drying room. Drying is the first preservation step, actually. Once the plants are dried, you can keep them for actually a number of years. Drying is done in whole plant. We dry the whole plant. That takes a week, and after a week, we can start what we call trimming the product. This is dried flower with the leaf still on it, and trimming means de-leafing the flower material. So where the law here is talking about cannabis leaves, we are actually talking about cannabis flowers. 50% of the weight of the whole plant is flower in the way we produce it. So the leaves are of less importance, and the leaves have less content compared to the real actual female flower. And this is the actual floss, as we call it, the flower at the end of the process. Some of the floss is being granulated already. It's prepared for patient use. This way, the product can be scooped out, it can be weighed easily, and patients don't have to work the product through a grinder or whatever. They can use it straight away in a herbal tea they make or in a vaporizer. The product being packaged, this is wholesale packaging, and after wholesale packaging it goes to a pharmaceutical company where it's, after checking up by the government, of course taking their samples, it's being packed this way in jars of 5 gram. It's just a herbal product inside, and people can use it in multiple ways. Arno will elaborate on that thing. The last question asked to me was, what is your personal experience with cannabis? Well, being a male and 1.86 tall, I don't know those numbers, but somebody wrote them down for me. 86 kilos, it's interesting. I tried Bedrocan, the Bedrocan variety only once. The Bedrocan variety contains 22% of THC, and when you are a healthy person and you use a product like that, I can tell you it's not even funny. I don't even enjoy it. It was really a bad experience, I can tell you. After that, it took me years to ever try it again, the product. I had my heartbeat was going up. My mind was, everything was changing in my mind. I didn't like it at all at that time, no. So what I experienced was something that is different for healthy people than for patients. Because what I learned from patients is when they use the exact same product, when they are in real pain, for instance, then it relieves the pain and they stay steady in their head. They are actually be able to work again and do their things. So leave it to the patients actually to use this product and get back in a healthy situation for them. I will not do it this way anymore. So that is basically my story. If any questions are left, but I think there is a question and a session later. So that's my part of the deal this morning.